My name is Arthur, 76 years old, and I never thought the walls that would surround me at the end of my life would be painted beige and smell faintly of disinfectant. When you've spent your life building something, a home, a family, a legacy, you expect to be remembered for it. But instead, I found myself in a room no bigger than the storage closet I once had in my workshop, with a single framed photo of my family staring back at me from the nightstand like a cruel reminder. I wasn't always alone. For most of my life, I believed in love, hard work, and sacrifice. My wife, Margaret, and I built our life from nothing. I worked as a carpenter, not rich, but proud. Every nail, every plank, every table I built was a piece of me. Margaret took care of the home, the kids, and somehow always made sure our small house felt warm no matter how cold the winters got. We had 2 children, David and Emily. I used to tell them that family was the only thing that could never be replaced. I worked long hours just to make sure they could go to college, have what I never did. Every night, I'd come home sore and tired, but the moment Emily would jump into my arms and David would tell me about his day at school, it all felt worth it. When Margaret passed away 10 years ago, everything changed. She was the glue that held us together. Her laughter echoed in every corner of that house, and when she was gone, the silence that followed was unbearable. I tried to stay close to my children. I called, I visited, I offered to babysit my grandkids, even fix things around their homes. But over time, the calls came less often. The visits became shorter, and one day, they simply stopped coming altogether. The last time I saw David before everything fell apart, he was standing in my kitchen, looking uncomfortable. He'd come to talk about options. He said I shouldn't be living alone anymore, that it wasn't safe. I thought maybe he was worried about me, that maybe he missed me. But then he said it, "Dad, we found a good place for you. A nursing home. It'll be better for everyone." Better for everyone. That phrase has a way of cutting deeper than any knife. I tried to reason with him. "Son, this is my home. Your mother and I built this together. Every inch of it has a story." He sighed, looking at me with that forced patience that children reserve for aging parents. "Dad, it's too much for you to manage. You'll have company there. Nurses, meals, everything you need." And before I knew it, my things were packed, my house sold, and I was sitting in the back of a van headed to a place called Golden Meadows. Golden Meadows. It sounded peaceful, didn't it? But peace was the last thing I found there. The first night, I sat by the window, staring out at the courtyard below. The wind rattled the trees, and for a moment, I thought I heard Margaret's voice, soft, distant, like she was telling me it was going to be all right. But it wasn't. The walls were thin, the rooms cold, and the faces around me were either lost in confusion or staring blankly at the TV. Days blurred into weeks. Breakfast, pills, TV, lunch, more pills, dinner, bed. I learned to fake a smile for the nurses, though some of them didn't even remember my name. To them, I was just another old man waiting for the clock to stop ticking. What hurt the most wasn't the loneliness. It was the forgetting. My own children hadn't called in months. My birthday came and went. The staff handed me a cupcake and sang a half-hearted song, but my phone stayed silent. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset bleed across the sky, I overheard 2 nurses talking. "Did you hear about that Miller guy? His kids sold his house before moving him here. Made quite a profit." I froze. The cupcake, the fake smiles, the quiet, they all suddenly made sense. My children hadn't sent me here for my safety. They'd sold my home, the one I built with my bare hands, while I was too broken-hearted to fight back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Betrayal is a strange kind of pain. It doesn't scream. It hums, low and constant, eating away at you from the inside. But I wasn't dead yet. And if my children thought they could erase me like an old photograph, they were about to learn that time might slow the body, but it sharpens the mind. The next morning, I asked the head nurse if there was a computer I could use. She looked surprised, but led me to the recreation room. Most of the residents played cards or dozed off in front of the TV, but I sat at the dusty old computer in the corner. 30 years of running my workshop had taught me one thing. People underestimate the old. They think we don't understand technology, that our minds are as fragile as our bones. But what they forget is that we've watched the world change, and some of us learned to adapt just to survive. So I started searching. My old address, property listings, real estate transfers, and there it was, my home, sold for nearly triple what I'd bought it for. The new owners were some company called Silverwood Investments, a shell corporation. The kind used to hide transactions. The listed contact person? My son, David Miller. My hand trembled, not from age this time, but from anger. That was the moment I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to die in this place, surrounded by strangers who barely knew my name. No, I was going to show them that they couldn't bury me alive in silence. They thought they'd sent me away to fade quietly, but I was going to make sure my name, my story, and my will, in every sense of the word, would be heard. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate a man who has nothing left to lose. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The hallways of Golden Meadows were quiet, the fluorescent lights flickering like weak stars. I sat up slowly, every joint reminding me of my years. But there was something new in me that hadn't been there the night before. Purpose. It had been months since I'd felt that fire. I used to wake up early to open my workshop, the scent of sawdust and varnish greeting me like an old friend. That smell was gone now, replaced by antiseptic and oatmeal, but the memory of it fueled me. I dressed carefully and made my way to the small common area where they kept the computer. It wasn't much, but it connected me to the world beyond those beige walls, a world that had moved on without me. I logged in again, hands trembling but determined. I found the official deed of sale, my son's name, his signature, the date, all right there. They'd sold my house only 3 days after I'd been admitted here. I could almost hear their conversation. Dad will be better off there. Yeah, and we could finally get rid of the maintenance costs. Cold, efficient, practical. I should have felt broken. But instead, something inside me hardened. For 30 years, I'd provided for them. I taught them to be honest, to earn, to give, and now they'd traded that legacy for profit. It was time to show them what it meant to cross a man who'd built everything from scratch. I began keeping notes in an old leather journal. Everything I heard, everything I noticed. Dates, names, little details. The nurses didn't pay much attention to me. They thought I was another confused old man jotting down nonsense. That was fine. Let them think that. One evening, while playing cards with a few other residents, I met George. 82 years old, a retired accountant, sharp as ever despite his failing eyesight. I told him a little of my story, just enough to see if I could trust him. His brow furrowed. "Arthur, they took advantage of you," he said. "You can fight this, you know." I shook my head. What court would listen to an old man whose own children signed the papers? George leaned back in his chair, his wrinkled hands folded. Maybe not a court, but people listen when there's truth and proof. He had a point. So, with his help, I began to dig deeper. George still remembered how to navigate property records, legal documents, tax histories. Each day, after breakfast, we'd huddle over that old computer, scrolling through pages of data that would make younger men give up in frustration. But we were patient. Patient men are dangerous. Weeks went by, and I learned that my house wasn't just sold, it had been flipped, renovated, repainted, and listed again for nearly $500,000 more. All through a web of fake names and companies that somehow led back to my son. George smiled when I showed him the evidence. "You've got enough to make a storm," but I wasn't ready to strike yet. Revenge, I realized, isn't about rage. It's about timing. Around that time, a new nurse started working the night shift. Her name was Rachel, young, kind, and the only person who looked at us like we were human beings and not medical charts. One evening, she found me in the rec room, staring at the computer screen long after lights out. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "you're not supposed to be up this late." I looked up, half expecting the usual lecture. But there was only concern in her eyes. "I'm not sleeping much these days," I said. "Bad dreams?" she asked. "Memories," I replied. She sat down beside me. "You know, sometimes talking about them helps." I hesitated, then told her everything. The house, the betrayal, the plan forming quietly in my head. Most people would have laughed, dismissed it as the ramblings of a bitter old man. But she didn't. She listened. When I was done, she said, "You remind me of my grandfather. He lost everything too, but he didn't give up either." That night, she did something unexpected. She handed me her tablet. This one works better than that old computer. You'll get further with this." I didn't know what to say. In a place built to make us feel forgotten, kindness hit harder than cruelty. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything I needed: bank records, sale documents, screenshots, even emails between David and the realtor. Every piece of proof told the same story. My children had sold me out, literally. But I still needed one more thing: a way to make them feel what I'd felt. So I began writing letters, not to them, but to people who knew them: old neighbors, business associates, church members. I told the truth, every ugly detail, not with bitterness, but with calm, measured words. I didn't accuse, I revealed. Each letter ended with the same line: "Sometimes, it's not death that makes a man disappear. It's the people who stop remembering him." George helped me mail them quietly. Rachel sometimes snuck in stamps and envelopes. It felt almost conspiratorial: two old men and a kind nurse against the machinery of indifference. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting by the window when Rachel came rushing in, holding her phone. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you might want to see this." There, on the local news website, was a headline that made my heart race: "Community outraged after man claims his children sold his home and abandoned him in nursing facility." My story had gone public. Someone, somewhere, had shared my letter. The article had my name, my photo, even a brief mention of Golden Meadows. Comments flooded in, people expressing disbelief, anger, sympathy. And then I saw it, David's name. He'd posted a defensive comment: "This is being exaggerated. My father agreed to the move. We were only trying to do what was best." But the damage was already done. The truth was out there now. The world finally saw what I'd been forced to live through in silence. That night, as I sat in my room, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. For once, I wasn't the forgotten old man. I was the voice that refused to be silenced. But I knew this was only the beginning. Because justice, real justice, doesn't end with exposure. It ends with accountability. And I was just getting started. The next few days were a whirlwind. Reporters began calling the nursing home. Some wanted quotes, others wanted to film interviews. The administration wasn't pleased. To them, I was just a resident, not a headline. They called me into the director's office, a gray little room with fake plants and the faint hum of an air conditioner. "Mr. Miller," said Mrs. Thompson, the director, in her polite, icy tone, "we've received attention because of your situation. It's creating disruptions for our staff." I folded my hands calmly. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I didn't plan for this." She adjusted her glasses. "Be that as it may, we ask that you refrain from speaking to the media without authorization." I looked at her, my voice steady. "Authorization? They took my home. My children left me here to rot. I think I've earned the right to speak." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed. "Mr. Miller, please understand. This is a nursing facility, not a stage." I stood up slowly, using my cane for balance. "Then you've never met an old man with something worth saying?" When I walked out of that office, Rachel was waiting down the hall. "They gave you the speech?" she asked. "Something like that," I said, managing a half smile. "Well," she said, "don't let them silence you. Not after everything you've done to be heard." It amazed me how quickly word spread. By the end of the week, strangers began sending letters to Golden Meadows. Some were from people my age, others from younger folks, saying the story reminded them to call their parents. I'd sit by the window every afternoon, reading them one by one. Each letter felt like a quiet rebellion, proof that kindness hadn't died with time. Then, one morning, I received a letter that made my hands tremble. The handwriting was familiar. It was from David. "Dad," it read, "I saw the article. You shouldn't have done that. People are asking questions at work. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please, can we talk?" For a long time, I stared at the paper, torn between fury and longing. My son wanted to talk, but was it guilt or damage control? George, ever the strategist, said, "Meet him." But not as the father he betrayed, as the man he underestimated. So I wrote back, agreeing to meet at the nursing home's garden that Saturday. The day came cold and gray, the kind of weather that makes you feel the weight of your years. I waited by the old oak tree, bundled in my coat. When David arrived, he looked smaller than I remembered. The confident businessman reduced to a nervous boy in a suit that didn't quite fit right anymore. He sat across from me, eyes darting to the ground. "Dad, you've made this so public. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I smiled faintly. "I just told the truth," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, the house, it wasn't about greed. We couldn't afford to keep up with it. Mom's gone. The bills were piling up." "Stop," I said sharply. "You sold it 3 days after putting me here. Don't insult me with excuses." He went quiet. Then, softer. "I didn't know you'd take it this hard." I leaned forward. "You didn't think I'd live long enough to find out." That hit him. I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of shame he tried to hide. "You know," I said, my voice low, "I built that house with my bare hands. Every nail, every beam. Your mother and I dreamed in those rooms, and you turned it into a transaction." He swallowed hard. "Dad, please. What do you want from me?" I looked at him, really looked. The same boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, to hold a hammer, to keep his word. "I want you to remember who raised you. I want you to understand what it means to value something other than money." He nodded slowly. "I can't undo what I did, but I can make it right. We can get you out of this place, a better facility." I cut him off. "I don't want a better prison. I want my dignity." That silenced him. He sat there, lost, unable to meet my gaze. When he finally stood up to leave, I said one last thing. "David, someday you'll grow old too. And when that day comes, I hope someone remembers you." He walked away, shoulders hunched, looking every bit like the man who had built walls around himself and suddenly realized he was trapped inside them. That evening, George found me sitting quietly in my room. "How'd it go?" "As expected," I said. "He came for absolution, not forgiveness." George chuckled. "Then he's in for a surprise." He was right. Because while David was busy trying to contain the damage, the real storm was still brewing. The news outlets were digging deeper, uncovering records, interviewing neighbors who remembered me fixing their fences and mowing their lawns. The community's outrage turned into action. People started questioning how often the elderly were quietly discarded for convenience. One local journalist reached out to me directly. "Mr. Miller," she said over the phone, "we want to run a special piece, not just about your case, but about elder neglect in general. Would you be willing to speak on camera?" For a long time, I'd avoided the spotlight. But now I realized my voice wasn't just for me anymore. It was for everyone who'd been silenced by abandonment and shame. "I'll do it," I said. The day of the interview, Rachel helped me prepare. She brushed my hair, straightened my collar, and said, "You're going to change more lives than you think." When the cameras rolled, I didn't need a script. The words came from the deepest part of me. The father, the husband, the worker, the man who gave everything and was cast aside. "I'm not here for pity," I said into the lens. "I'm here to remind people that love isn't something you outgrow. You don't retire from family. And if you forget the ones who built your life, someday, someone will forget you too." When it aired, it went viral. Not for drama, but for truth. Letters turned into donations for senior centers. Volunteers showed up at Golden Meadows. And somewhere in the noise of it all, I began to feel alive again. But beneath that quiet triumph, another feeling began to grow. The realization that this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the turning point. The week after the interview aired, everything changed. For the first time in months, my room didn't feel like a cell. Cards, flowers, and care packages arrived daily. Strangers dropped by the nursing home, asking to meet Mr. Miller, the man who reminded the world not to forget their elders. Even the staff treated me differently now. Polite, cautious, even a little reverent. But fame, even the accidental kind, has its shadows. One morning as I sipped my tea by the window, the receptionist knocked on my door. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you have visitors." I turned, surprised. "Visitors?" She nodded. "A woman and 2 kids. My breath caught. For a moment, I thought I'd heard wrong. Then, as I walked down the hall, my heart began to hammer in my chest. There, in the visitor's lounge, stood my daughter, Lisa, the one who hadn't spoken to me since she signed the nursing home papers. She looked older, tired, maybe even guilty. Beside her were my grandchildren, both taller than I remembered, shifting awkwardly near the vending machine. "Hi, Dad," Lisa said softly. I stood still for a moment, trying to gather words that didn't sound like accusation. "Lisa, this is unexpected." "I know," she said, twisting her hands. "I saw your interview. I didn't realize how much it hurt you being here. I thought you were okay." "Okay?" I repeated, a hollow laugh escaping my throat. "Lisa, I spent months wondering if my own family even remembered I existed." Her eyes welled up. "I'm sorry. I thought this place was what you needed. You seemed so tired after Mom passed. David said it was best." "David always says what's convenient," I cut in sharply. "But what about what's right?" The room went quiet, the ticking of the wall clock filling the silence. My youngest grandchild, Ethan, finally broke it. "Grandpa," he said softly, "we saw you on YouTube. You were really brave." Something in me cracked at that. I knelt down slowly and smiled faintly. Bravery's just another word for doing what no one else will. Lisa wiped her eyes. "Dad, I want to make things right. I don't know how, but can we try again?" For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I'd imagined this moment for so long, but it always ended with me walking away, not with her standing there, trembling with regret. I took a deep breath. Trying again means more than visits. It means remembering, calling, showing up. I don't need pity. I need family. She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I understand. And maybe, for the first time." She did. After they left, I sat back by the window, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds. Rachel walked in, smiling softly. "Family?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. "Maybe the beginning of one again." She nodded. "That's something most people here never get." That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled across my floor, and I found myself thinking, not about what I'd lost, but about what I could still build. My voice, my story, had power. And power, when guided by love, could change things. The next morning, I told Rachel my plan. "I want to start something," I said. "A foundation. A place where forgotten seniors can share their stories. Maybe then the world will remember us not as burdens, but as teachers." Rachel grinned. "You're serious?" "As serious as a man with borrowed time can be," I said. We started small. A few residents gathered in the common room every Thursday. I brought a notebook. Rachel brought coffee, and we began recording stories. Some were tragic, others hilarious. There was George talking about his years as a train conductor, Margaret telling tales of sneaking out to dance halls in the 1,940 seconds. Word spread fast. Soon, volunteers from the local college started coming in with cameras and recording equipment. They called it the Golden Voices Project. Within weeks, it became a local phenomenon. People started tuning in online to hear these forgotten voices. And for the first time, in a long time, the nursing home buzzed with life. Laughter echoed down the hallways again. Residents who once sat staring at walls now rehearsed stories for the camera. But the biggest surprise came one Sunday morning. I was sitting in the dining hall when Mrs. Thompson, the director, approached me, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Mr. Miller," she said, "there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." I turned, and my heart skipped a beat. David stood there, holding a small box in his hands. He looked different. No suit, no arrogance. Just a son, with tired eyes. "Dad," he began, voice low, "I watched your videos. The stories, the way people responded. It's incredible. You did something good. I wanted to be part of it." I said nothing, just studied his face. He set the box on the table and opened it. Inside was a small hand-carved plaque, "For my father who taught me what family really means." My chest tightened. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'd like a chance to earn it." It wasn't an apology wrapped in words. It was one carved in wood, humble and real. I looked at him, and the years of anger softened, just a little. "Then start by listening," I said, "to the stories, to the people you forgot to see." And that's exactly what he did. Over the next few weeks, David started visiting regularly. He helped edit videos, brought snacks, even repaired some of the old furniture in the lounge. At first, the residents eyed him suspiciously, but soon he became part of our little community. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, he and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "You know," he said, "for years I thought success was about building something bigger than yourself. But you built something within people. That's what lasts." I smiled faintly. "Took you long enough to see it." He laughed softly. "Yeah, guess some lessons come late." The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, like a bridge finally repaired after years of neglect. Inside, the faint sound of George's laughter drifted down the hallway. I leaned back, the warm evening air filling my lungs, and thought, maybe life's not about how you're remembered when you're gone. Maybe it's about who you remind to keep remembering while you're still here. That night, before I turned off the light, I wrote one final entry in my journal. They thought they left me behind, but maybe I was just waiting for them to catch up. The morning sun crept through the blinds, soft and golden, touching every corner of my little nursing home room. The world outside had begun to change in quiet, surprising ways. Letters arrived from strangers, children, teachers, people who said my story reminded them to call their parents, to visit their grandparents, to simply remember. It was strange how something that began in pain could end up mending hearts. The Golden Voices Project had become something far bigger than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just about stories anymore. It was about second chances, about giving life back to those who had been quietly fading away. One morning, Rachel came in carrying a newspaper, her grin wider than I'd ever seen. "You're on the front page again," she said, laughing. "They're calling you the man who woke the forgotten." I chuckled, shaking my head. A dramatic headline for an old man with too much time and a bit of honesty. She leaned against the window, her smile softening. "Don't downplay it, George. You made people care again. That's no small thing." That afternoon, a young reporter visited. She couldn't have been more than 25, yet she spoke with a sense of awe as she asked questions about the project, my life, my family. When she finished, she asked one final question that caught me off guard. "If you could go back, Mr. Miller, before all of this, before the pain, the distance, what would you do differently?" I thought for a long time before answering. I'd listen more, not to reply, not to defend, but to understand. Families fall apart when people stop hearing each other. I thought providing was enough. I forgot that love isn't just built, it's maintained, like an old house. Neglect it long enough, and it crumbles. The reporter nodded, writing my words down carefully, then left quietly. That night, as I sat with Rachel watching the news, a segment came on, a feature about the project. The anchor spoke about how hundreds of nursing homes across the country were now starting similar initiatives. Footage played of elderly men and women sharing their stories, smiling as young volunteers listened intently. I turned to Rachel. "We started something real, didn't we?" She smiled. "You did. You gave people a reason to remember." Days passed peacefully after that. Lisa visited often, bringing home-cooked meals and laughter that had been missing for years. Ethan and his sister sometimes helped record videos, and the home itself no longer felt like a waiting room for the forgotten. It felt alive, like a community again. Even David changed. One evening, he pulled me aside in the garden, where the scent of roses hung heavy in the warm air. "Dad," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "I sold the firm." I blinked, startled. "You what?" "I sold it. I realized I'd spent my life building something that didn't build me. I want to help run the foundation full-time. I want to make this my work, our work." For a long moment, I just stared at him. I thought of the boy who once turned away from me, ashamed of my wrinkled hands, too proud to understand the value of humility. Now he stood before me, eyes clear, purpose written across his face. "I think," I said slowly, "that might be the first decision I'm proud of you for making." He laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. "Took me 50 years, but I'll take it." We worked together after that, father and son, not rebuilding the past, but building something entirely new. We traveled to nursing homes across the state, recording stories, listening, sharing. The world seemed smaller and kinder in those rooms filled with memories. Sometimes I'd sit back and watch him, camera in hand, leaning forward as an elderly woman spoke about her youth, and I'd feel something deep inside me ease, like a wound finally healing. One evening, after another long day of filming, David and I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the hills. The sky burned orange, melting into shades of lavender and pink. "You know, Dad," he said, breaking the silence, "for years I blamed you for being distant after Mom died. But now I get it. You weren't distant. You were grieving, and I punished you for it." I turned my head slowly. "We all punish what we don't understand." He nodded. "I just wish I'd understood sooner." "So do I admitted. "But the thing about time is it doesn't care about wishes. All we can do is use what's left." He smiled faintly. "Then let's not waste another minute." The stars began to emerge, one by one. The quiet between us wasn't cold anymore. It was the kind that comes from peace, the kind earned through pain, reflection, and truth. Months turned into a year. The foundation grew beyond our wildest dreams. We began receiving letters from families who'd reconnected after watching our videos. People wrote about visiting parents they hadn't seen in years, about forgiving old wounds, about remembering that age doesn't erase worth. The nursing home, once a symbol of abandonment, became a sanctuary of hope. We hosted weekly gatherings, community dinners, even storytelling festivals. Local schools began bringing students in to hear life lessons from residents, bridging generations one story at a time.